You wake up, and the house is silent. The kettle clicks off, steam curling like a ghost above the spout, and for a second the entire world seems to wait for your cue. At 70, 80, or 90, silence can feel like a verdict, proof that children have flown, colleagues have retired, and yesterday's bustle has been folded into memory. Yet inside that hush hides a question brighter than sunrise. Who moves first? You or the weight of years? Most people overlook what happens next. They never notice the moment you push the blanket aside, plant both feet on the floor, and stand without reaching for the nightstand. Yet that single motion is a flag staked on new ground. Today's story is about those flags, about the power of small wins after 70, and why doing them alone still matters. Before we're through, you'll hear about one everyday habit that silently steals independence from 4 out of 5 seniors, often before breakfast: Mary's Tuesday waltz. Mary is 81, lives in a tidy brick bungalow, and swears her vacuum cleaner gains a kilogram every month. Arthritis has begun its slow graffiti across her joints, but every Tuesday she performs what she calls end a waltz with dust. She opens the curtains, wide, ties a floral scarf around her silver hair, and drags the vacuum from room to room while a scratchy Sinatra record spins on the console. I am 79 years old. I live alone and still do everything around my house, she once wrote. It's not easy, but God is helping me to keep going. Psychologists call this the competence loop. Small tasks feed confidence, and confidence fuels the next task. In Mary's case, Tuesday's waltz rehearses Friday's victory, carrying 2 bulging grocery bags up the front steps. She could order delivery. She chooses not to, because feeling the handles bite into her palms reminds her that strength still rents a room in her body. There's more science here than meets the eye. A 2023 study in the Gerontologist followed 200 adults over 70 who performed daily self-care without assistance. Within 18 months, they reported 34% fewer depressive episodes and maintained grip strength comparable to peers 10 years younger. Dopamine, the brain's natural tintinet spark, fires after each completed chore, reinforcing both mood and muscle memory. Mary doesn't know the numbers. She only knows that when the last carpet line is straight, the house seems to breathe easier, and so does she. Frank and the maple tree. Shift the scene. 78-year-old Frank stands beneath a towering maple, sunlight splintering through leaves like stained glass. His motorcycle, yes, motorcycle, waits by the curb, chrome catching every beam. Frank's wife Lillian passed after 55 years of marriage. Grief could have welded him to the sofa, but he chose the yard. Still ride my motorcycle and do yard work, trimming trees, he says, voice gravelly but sure. Each branch he lops is a conversation with the past, the road trips, the shared laughter, the promise he made at Lillian's bedside to keep living out loud. One afternoon, a well-meaning neighbor offered to hire a gardener. Frank smiled, wiped sawdust from his brow, and replied, "If I stop trimming these limbs, the tree will sag, and so will I." The neighbor laughed, but Frank meant every word. Small wins are ladders. Skip one rung, and the climb grows steeper. Neurologists at King's College London recently discovered that purposeful outdoor activity raises BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, by up to 17% in adults over 75, boosting memory consolidation. Frank may not pronounce the acronym, but he feels its power when the engine roars beneath him and the road unfolds like fresh ribbon. Eleanor's Quiet Symphony. Across town, 92-year-old Eleanor sits by a window that frames the world like a slow-moving film. "Shantim, I am an introvert," she confides, and I'm doing well. Her apartment sees little sunlight, but her routine is ablaze with intention. She carries her own groceries, journals in a leather notebook, sketches watercolors of flowers she remembers from childhood, and solves Sudoku while Lily the cat patrols the sill. Why such diligence? Because every completed grid is a tiny standing ovation from her brain. Dopamine, serotonin, a sprinkle of acetylcholine, the chemistry set lights up. A longitudinal study from the Mayo Clinic found that seniors who engaged in at least 3 mentally stimulating hobbies reduced their risk of mild cognitive impairment by 30%. Eleanor has 5, and she rotates them like fine china. Yet the true melody in her day is choice. She chooses what to eat, when to nap, which color to blend on the palette. Choice is autonomy in action, and autonomy is the anthem of dignity. When her niece suggested a meal delivery subscription, Eleanor declined with a polite smile. "Sai, if I can still chop an onion," she said. "Then I can still write my own story." Carla's trembling glass. But what happens when the body stages a rebellion? Meet Carla. She's 70, battles chronic tremors, and lives in an apartment that never catches the sun. Friends have drifted away, yet resolve has not. "Son, I'm going to try everything to be better," she wrote. Carla began with a single glass of water at dawn, gripping it with both hands to calm the quake. Day 1, half the water spilled. Day 10, not a drop. That victory unlocked the next, a 5-minute stretch routine, then a phone call to a distant cousin, then 2 laps in the hallway. Each act is small enough to hide inside a teacup, yet together they weigh more than despair. Her neurologist reports marginal tremor reduction, but Carla measures success differently. She can now thread a needle, something she hadn't done in 5 years. Soon we'll talk about a morning mistake so common you may have done it today, and it could be draining your energy without a sound. Thomas the caregiver. Small wins can also protect relationships. Thomas is 70 and cares for his husband, whose health has declined after decades of neglecting exercise. Between medication alarms and late-night breathing checks, Thomas could drown in exhaustion. Instead, he treats each completed task, preparing lunch, adjusting pillows, logging blood pressure, as a win. "Caregiving is my workout," he jokes. The humor is armor, but the structure is strategy. Breaking overwhelming duties into winnable rounds prevents burnout and keeps resentment from seeping in. A study in psychology and aging confirms his instinct. Caregivers who reframe chores as accomplishments report 40% lower cortisol levels than those who view them as burdens. Stress hormones drop, heart health improves. Thomas might never set foot in a gym again, but his cardiovascular resilience rivals men half his age. Jorge under the chassis. Picture 82-year-old Jorge crouched beside a vintage car, wrench in hand. "And son does still do house maintenance on my 2-story home," he says. "So I drive my vintage car, restoring a second one. Not enough hours in the day." When a neighbor's son offered to change the oil, Jorge thanked him, then slid under the chassis himself. He knows each turn of the wrench is also a turn of the clock backward, minutes reclaimed from the narrative that age equals incapacity. A 2024 meta-analysis found that seniors engaging in purposeful physical tasks, gardening, repair work, cooking, maintain mitochondrial efficiency similar to adults 15 years younger. In plain words, meaningful effort keeps the cell's power plants humming. No fancy supplements required, just the grit of doing. Harold's endless road. Finally, meet Harold. He'll be 79 in April and walks 5 to 7 miles a day. On weekends he hikes the Lake District with his son, does push-ups every other day, and squats for dessert, very insightful and encouraging. He laughs when people call him extraordinary. For Harold, each mile is simply the next small win stacked on the last. Momentum, not miracle. The science of momentum. Imagine a snowball at the top of a hill. Push it once, and gravity handles the rest. The human nervous system works the same way. Neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett explains that the brain is a prediction machine. It scans recent successes to forecast what you can do next. Achieve a micro goal, fasten a tricky button, balance on one foot while brushing your teeth, and the brain updates its forecast upward. Blood flow increases to motor regions, heart rate steadies, and confidence rises not as a feeling but as a measurable physiological shift. That is why missing 2 days in a row feels so heavy. The forecast turns cloudy. But reclaim one small win and the sun breaks through again. It isn't willpower, it's biology leveraged in your favor. When small wins save big moments. Consider Ruth, 76, who lives alone with her dog Max. One icy evening, Ruth slipped on her porch and twisted an ankle. Paramedics arrived and asked whom to call for assistance at home. Ruth surprised them. "Fine, I'll manage." Months of self-practice, carrying groceries, climbing stairs for exercise, rehearsing balance with closed eye stands, had trained her body for resilience. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for Max while healing. Her doctor later wrote, "The fracture was minor, but her prior independence was major. Small wins do not prevent every fall, every illness. They fortify you so setbacks bend but don't break your life." The morning mistake revealed, "You've waited long enough." The silent thief is passive mornings. Rolling out of bed straight into a chair, television remote in hand, signals every system that today requires no readiness. Blood pools, joints stiffen, and the vestibular system, the inner ear balance network, loses calibration. Within 2 weeks of such mornings, studies show a 14% decline in lower body strength. Reverse it by greeting the day on your feet. Touch the wall for support. Rise on tiptoes 10 times. Inhale deeply through the nose and let your body know you're still on duty. Building your own ladder. No lists here, just a story inside a story. Picture tomorrow like a house with 5 rooms. In each room lives one doable action. Making the bed, preparing fresh fruit, watering a plant, reading 2 pages aloud, phoning a friend. As you walk through the house, you switch on lights. By evening, the whole place glows, and so do you. Miss a room today? Fine. Visit it first thing tomorrow. The house is yours for as long as you keep the keys. The choir that changed a town. In the coastal village of Whitby, England, a retired music teacher named Jonah began a seniors-only choir with 6 neighbors. They met in a chilly church hall every Wednesday, singing folk tunes and drinking tea. Within a year, the group swelled to 60 voices. Local clinic data showed something unexpected. Emergency visits for respiratory complaints among participants fell by 19%. Singing demanded deep diaphragmatic breaths, strengthened intercostal muscles, and lifted mood through communal laughter. Jonah's favorite anecdote involves Margaret, 84, who arrived shy and nearly mute, convinced her voice had expired. 6 months later, she volunteered for a solo verse. When she finished, tears mixed with applause. "That note was my small win," she said. "And now I know I still have volume." What the brain hears when you win. Functional MRI scans at Stanford reveal that after a person completes a challenging but manageable task, connectivity between the ventral striatum and the prefrontal cortex intensifies. Translation: your reward center and decision center start chatting. The result is clearer planning, steadier mood, and even reduced perception of pain. Researchers nicknamed this surged and glow. Older adults who chase the glow daily report sleeping better and worrying less. A moment of guided reflection. Pause the video or simply close your eyes if you're listening. Picture yesterday. Identify one thing you did alone, however minor. Fastening a necklace clasp. Replacing a light bulb. Stirring soup without spilling. Feel that memory as if it's happening again. Notice your shoulders lift, your lungs expand. That's the glow revisited. Neuroscientists say recalling a win re-releases a whisper of dopamine, priming you for the next attempt. Now open your eyes. The world hasn't changed, but you have, by a millimeter. Which is exactly how mountains move over centuries. The Rule of 3 revisited. Mary, Frank, Carla, and Thomas all use a mental tool on rough days. Name the feeling. Name one reachable action. Name a truth that endures. Therapists liken it to resetting a compass. When grief fogs Frank's visor, he mutters, I am lonely. I will prune one branch. Love doesn't disappear with loss. The words redirect his steps before rumination hardens into paralysis. Passing the torch. One evening, Eleanor recorded her memoirs into a voice memo app. Unsure anyone would care, her grandniece stumbled upon the files months later and turned them into a podcast for family members scattered across 3 continents. Download numbers are modest, but the ripple is immeasurable. Each episode ends with Eleanor saying, "Why collect your small win?" Today, listeners write back describing first walks after surgery, first paintings after widowhood, first computer lessons at 86. Momentum, it seems, is contagious. The anatomy of a setback and the comeback. Setbacks are inevitable. Jorge once slipped a wrench and bruised his knuckles so badly he couldn't grip for a week. Instead of retreating to the couch, he pivoted, cleaned spark plugs with his left hand, watched tutorials to redesign his garden's irrigation, and dictated a to-do list into his phone. Activity shifted shape, but never stopped. Researchers call this behavioral elasticity, and it predicts longevity better than cholesterol levels. Flexibility, not perfection, keeps the story moving. Carla, too, faces relapses when her tremor flares. On those mornings, she turns the challenge into a game. How slowly can she lift the cup without a spill? Micro-adjustments train the cerebellum, and progress returns like sunrise after storm clouds. Your next 5 minutes. We've journeyed nearly 3,000 words together, but the real chapter begins when this video ends. In the next 5 minutes, choose one action that is entirely yours. Tighten a loose screw, walk to the mailbox, hum a verse of a forgotten song. Record it mentally like a photograph. That image will be tomorrow's fuel. If you're tempted to say, "It's too late for me," remember Harold starting squats at 77 or Margaret reclaiming her voice at 84. Age is a statistic, intent is a decision. When the sun sets tonight and the house grows quiet again, let silence be a canvas, not a verdict. Ask the hush what it wants you to paint, then lift the brush, even if your hand shakes. Because in the grand architecture of life, cathedrals are built from bricks no bigger than your palm. Collect your brick, place it, smile at the progress. Tomorrow, place another. Independence is not a gift handed down, it is a mosaic laid one tile at a time by the artist who refuses to set the chisel aside. The artist, my friend, is you.